7971-988 Salami Enterprises for all your printing and photocopy services.
On a global scale, the human cost of coronavirus is stark. More than 3,000 deaths, tens of thousands of people testing positive, more still worried about the threat of a pandemic. There has also been an economic cost. Markets have plunged and industries are feeling the pain. But how bad will the financial fallout be? How would you measure that? And why does it matter? Alhaji Koli is discussing the issues from a Gambian angle with economist and blogger Njie.
Mr. Nyang, how do you read the Gambian economy as the coronavirus hits home? The hotel and entertainment sector is virtually paralyzed, and the need for social distancing is certainly bound to hit small businesses too, isn't it?
Well, I think the Gambian economy undoubtedly has shown that it is not insulated from the global economy. And what happens in the global economy surely reverberates into our local economy. Hence, the sudden downturn we have seen in business activity in our economy, considering the tourism business and other service-related businesses. So what can we do? I think there's two things we can do. One is to mitigate a further downturn of our economy. And the best way we can do it is to start having at the public policy level strategies to substitute imports. These strategies are how can Gambia start producing food to be more self-sufficient. And in so doing, we reduce our import bill, and consequently, we reduce our reliance on external importation of food, because food security is the basic that we need to survive as a nation. Then the second phase will be that of our health. Our health right now is of grave concern to all Gambians because we are fighting a battle with a vicious virus called COVID-19. And the biggest problem to date is not the virus itself, but our exposure to this virus. If you look at our healthcare professionals, the ambulance drivers, the orderlies, the nurses, the doctors, they all are not prepared to fight this COVID-19 because they lack the minimum preventive gear needed to make sure that they don't get infected. So yes, as a nation, COVID-19 is really showing us its ugly face, and we need to find a way to be resilient economically and medically.
Mr. Njie, to cushion the effects on the economy, we hear governments globally have come up with various stimulus packages. What do you make of the $500 million announced by the Barrow government? And is it actually a package to help businesses?
Well, fundamentally, the moment you say stimulus or you say subsidies, it means you're giving out something. But before you give out, you must have it. You cannot give what you don't have. So if you look at Budget 2020, there was no provision for such a thing. But since this is an emergency, I think the government is allowed to raise money to make sure that we fight this eventuality. But what are the priorities for government? I think fundamentally our biggest priority right now must be that of the healthcare sector, and also to make sure that the social safety net of the country is intact. When we say social safety net, today if Gambia goes on a complete lockdown and happen to have a state of emergency, 60% of Gambian households will not get food to eat because most of them are on daily wages. So these are the issues that the government is confronting, and I believe Gambia as a nation, from 1965 to date, this is the biggest challenge we have faced as a nation, socially and economically. And what we need right now is leadership. When we say leadership, we're just not talking about positions. We're talking about the President of the Republic standing up, standing out, rising to the occasion, and be counted as a solution provider and equally as an inspirator to make sure that we have hope that we can live to fight and combat this COVID-19 collectively as a nation.
Mr. Njie, you take keen interest in tourism. The sector is in a dire strain. Hotel closing left, right, and center. How serious are warnings of economic catastrophe if the government doesn't bail the sector out?
Well, the government, like I said once again, I like to be fair with the government. Before you bail out, you must have the resources to provide and give. Right now, tourism as a sector is suffering, and is suffering severely because COVID-19 arrived at the middle of the tourist season, not the end, in the middle. So the disruption is highly felt by the sector, and the sector is retrenching and downsizing its manpower needs, meaning people have been sent home, hotels are closed, guests are not coming, flights are not landing. So what can we do once again as a nation? What we can do is to further diversify our economic base and our reliance on tourism. And how can that be done? We should focus more on agriculture, and the agriculture we need to focus on is not even export-driven, but local consumption. Once we start doing this, we will produce or provide labor, or labor production will happen, capital formation will happen, and the agricultural sector will grow. So sometimes miserable things like COVID-19, when it happens, it should give governments and economies the opportunity to realign their economies. And this is a very good opportunity for the government of the Gambia and the people of the Gambia to once and for all realign our economy to make it more of an agro-processing-driven economy.
Mr. Njie, the coronavirus crisis comes less than 3 months after spending started as per the 2020 national budget. How will the government's response to the virus impact the budget?
Well, the budget has been impacted severely, and this impact on the budget is an adverse or a negative impact. Negative impact in the sense that budgets are estimates, and these estimates are based on projections of revenues to be collected or grant and aid to be received. We all know that tax revenue is going down, and it will go down consequently and significantly because economic activity has slowed down. When we say economic activity, we're talking about airplanes flying out of the Gambia. We're talking about hotels shutting down, restaurants shutting down, people staying home more, taxi drivers buying less fuel. What's going to happen? GRA will collect less money, and the government's anticipated budget will be significantly affected downwards. So what can we do right now? What the government can do is to look at budget 2020 and see what can be deferred in terms of expenditures. If there are things that the government can push to a later date, we can do so to make sure that we don't borrow further, and that borrowing may take us back to the debt stress that we found ourselves and we just tried to get out of. So COVID-19, if it's not managed properly, the government of the Gambia and the people of the Gambia will go back to the drawing board and end up in a very macro distable environment, and that's not what we want. Therefore, I urge the Minister of Finance to take a critical look at the budget and see areas that we can defer, areas that we can postpone expenditure on. But we should not stop putting expenditures on social services to make sure that the average Gambians have food on their table and the bare minimum to survive, and also make sure that our health service is of a good standing so that we can live to fight another day.
Mr. Njie, do you agree with emergency measures introduced to deal with goods overpricing?
Well, we have to understand one thing. Economics in general is a behavioral science. When people talk about overpricing, I think it's more on an emotional standpoint than a realistic standpoint. When we said in Gambia we have one case of COVID-19, there was a panic rush and all of us went to the markets to buy goods and services. That in itself will change the price levels. Secondly, businessmen, when they price their product or when they do their price build-up, they also do an anticipation of what you call replenishment of stock. When I sell this, I have to buy again. When they were buying 1,000 bags of rice, they were anticipating, let's say, $100,000 to restock it. Today, they're anticipating $120,000 to restock the same 1,000 bags of rice. So basically, what they're doing, they're adjusting their prices for future purchases that they have to make to bring that same quantity of rice back to their stocks. So, yes, there may be a price hike, but generally price levels have changed the world over because of the panic of COVID-19 and the measures individuals are taking to prevent themselves from having a stock out.
Mr. Njie, it's too early to talk about recovery, but how much time do you think the country will need to bounce back from this crisis?
Well, fundamentally, once again, if you understand economics and behavior of economies, you will realize that an economy has what you call a lag effect. A lag effect is when something happens today, it takes a while for that shock to hit the economy, and it takes even a further while for that shock to be adjusted and corrected. So even if COVID-19 happens to come to an end by July, August, 2020 as a year is a foregone year for productivity and positive GDP. So I can see the Gambian economy rebounding sometime around Q2 of 2021 for the simple reason that we have lost 2020. And now what's going to happen, companies will try to resurrect their businesses, and that will take time. And before they stand on their feet and be up and running, we're looking at March through June of 2021.
Mr. Njie, finally, imagine you are the special advisor on the economy. What would your advice be to the finance minister?
I will not advise the finance minister. I will advise the president himself, because the president is the commander-in-chief. The president right now, COVID-19 is a war, and is a war without bullets and guns. The virus is attacking us. So we are at war. And when a country is at war, they have to go to a heightened state of alert, and that heightened state of alert forces us to go into an emergency situation. The president must be now commander-in-chief, create a war room inside the State House called the Command Control Center, and in that Command Control Center, he controls all spheres of the economy. But what is more important right now for the economy is nothing more than confidence. The president, through his leadership, needs to show Gambia that we are resilient, we are confident, and we are going to get out of it. Then Gambians will stop the panic buying. It's the panic buying that is creating the chaos in the economy. Then the next step is, at the finance level, how are we going to mitigate the external shocks that Gambia is going to face? Today, there are no flights inbound to the Gambia. Most importers will want to order rice through their banks. The banks need to have positions internationally outside Gambia to do international settlements for these traders. No flights out, it means no shipment of cash. No shipment of cash, someone has to step in, and that is the central bank. And this is where we need leadership, so that the government, through the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Trade, can make sure that business flows seamlessly so that we don't have price disruption and commodity shortages.
Mr. Nyang Njie, thank you so very much for your time talking to West Coast Radio.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
That was Nyang Njie, the economist and blogger who also co-hosts West Coast Radio's No Holds Barred talk show, Straight Talk, on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. He spoke there to our industrious senior reporter and stand-in producer Alhaji Kuli, and their insightful conversation brings to an end this edition of Coffee Time with Peter Gomez. One more to go for the week, and that's coming tomorrow. So join us then. For now, though, it's thank you for your company and goodbye.